Yo, what's the story? The GoPro Hero 12 is capable of some pretty cool photos. However, there's a whole bunch of photo settings, and unless you can figure them out, you're not going to be taking any photos, good, bad, or otherwise. So let's dive in and make you a GoPro photo ninja right now. It's very easy to get into the photo mode. Simply press the mode button on the side of the GoPro Hero 12 until you get into it. Alternatively, you can just swipe left to right until you get to the mode that you're going, but that's pretty easy. So let's jump back into photo on the general preferences, which you can find over here. There's not a great deal that you got to worry about in photo here. All of the photo settings are within the presets. Now, what's a preset? Let's dive in and get into the real nitty-gritty of the photo mode in the GoPro Hero 12. So down here is what we see is a preset, and this is right out of the box from the GoPro Hero 12. Around here, we have different icons, and these are called shortcuts. So for example, on this preset here, this one here is our delay timer. So we can go 3 seconds, we can go 10 seconds. Essentially what happens is when you press the shutter button, GoPro 12 is going to count down, then it's going to take the photograph. Now there's a particular very good reason that you would actually use this, besides the fact of you trying to run into the shot and maybe time yourself, but I'll get into the main reason you would use this in a bit. Now down here we have our lens choices. So we have our wide lens, which is 16 to 34 mil. That's what this looks like. And then we have our linear lens, which is 19 to 39. This shortcut here, this little icon, we can select up to 10 seconds. We can go more, 60. So let's go with 5 seconds to show you exactly what happens here. So let's have this on 5. Now, GoPro's on the delay timer still, so it's going to take a picture. Then it's going to take another picture after 5 seconds. So depending on what you're doing, you could shoot a whole bunch of different photos here, one after the other, and you decide the time difference between each time the GoPro fires off a shot. And down here then is we have our settings cog. So this is really, really important. So if we press this, we can go into the settings for the existing preset. Do we go linear or do we go wide? And if we scroll down a little bit here, we have our capture. So we've got output. Now I'm going to go through all of these outputs that you can set this to. Super photo, basically what this does, it allows the GoPro to do all the processing. And if we go down, we do HDR. So it's going to kind of combine the bright and the dark scenes, and it's going to make a HDR photo. Kind of similar to the way they do HDR video in the GoPro. And then if we go down here, we've just got standard. So it's just a bog standard JPEG file. And if we go all the ways down to the bottom, you control freaks will like this. This is RAW. So it saves your photo as both JPEG, and it also gives you a RAW file, which is theoretically probably the best thing to use the GoPro photo mode for, is spit everything out that you can in RAW, because it gives you more control, a little bit more dynamic range. RAW for the win. But either way, none of these photo options will give you a really bad result. I really like Super Photo. Our HDR looks really, really cool as well. Our interval and duration kind of go together. So if we bring our interval up, let's bring it up to 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds, the GoPro is going to take, as we know, a photo. But if we select duration, then we can go, okay, we want it to record for 5 minutes in this case here, and that's what it's going to record at. Now, depending on what you want, it might never have to use this, but it's a nice option to have, and you can go all the way up to 3 hours, which is freaking insane. Probably bring a USB battery pack and plug it in if you're doing that. Schedule capture, if you want the GoPro to get up early before you and take a sunset, sunrise, what comes first? Yeah, anyway, this is where you would do it here, so you can edit it to whatever way you want. So our delay timer, if you're taking kind of night lapse photos or any kind of photo that's got just a little bit more in it, set the delay timer to go off 3 seconds, or the other option here is 10 seconds, because when you press the shutter button, there is going to be a slight little bit of vibration. So if you're taking a photograph instantly, you might get that little bit of motion blur, and especially if it's kind of, you know, long exposure stuff, not a great idea. So 10 seconds or 3 seconds, when you press that bad boy, there is no vibration now. So that's a good rule of thumb to do it, besides getting yourself in frame, star photography, any night lapse stuff. Always have that on, depending on what kind of thing that you're doing. Now, let's dive back into the rest of the settings here. Next up is our zoom. I would just say forget this exists because it zooms in and it's not a great zoom. It just don't use the zoom, okay? Now let's go down a little bit further, and then we have Pro Tune. Now, depending on the mode that you're in, some of these might be grayed out, which means you can't actually use them, which depending on what you're doing, you might want to take some control of the exposure value or the ISO or whatever. Up here, our output settings kind of determine a lot. So to get the full bang out of everything, really, it's generally standard. And if we go back down here, we can actually see that we've got lots more options, including our shutter now, which is not grayed out. So shutter on auto generally is good enough, but depending on what you've got going on, maybe you've got ND filters that you want to use, or you want something even faster, you can go up to 1/2000 of a second. So we can bring that down to auto and leave it as. GoPros generally kind of overexpose things slightly. So I find the exposure value compensation, so you can make things brighter or darker. So in a lot of cases, you might bring it down to 0.5. 0 should be good enough on the GoPro Hero 12, but just keep that in mind. And if you're in a very, very dark situation, just bring it all the way up to 2. But remember, the more you kind of fiddle about here with anything, including the ISO, the brighter you make it, the more noise you can bring into the image, which is not a good look. White balance. So essentially what white balance here is how cold or warm a particular scene is. So for example, if I take the little lens cap off here and we bring it all the way up to 6500 Kelvin, we can see things are getting a lot warmer. And if we bring it down, it's all the ways to 2300 Kelvin, which is very, very cool. So depending on the mood you're going for, you may choose to fiddle about with that, or you can leave it on auto. In a lot of cases, auto is probably okay. The ISO settings here on the GoPro Hero 12 are minimum. So this is the minimum the ISO will always be, and then the ISO max. Now, again, this is way too much for a GoPro, in my opinion. It's just not able to handle a very kind of a bright kind of ISO, like 3200. There's going to be noise everywhere. So what I would suggest, no higher than 400 or 800, particularly at night, because you're going to introduce artifacts and noise into your photograph. Not a good look. Although to be fair, the GoPro handles nighttime photo a lot better than nighttime video, but that's a story for another video. Make sure you subscribe, by the way. Now, sharpness. Here's a biggie, okay? This one is very, very important because it can make your photos look really crap, or actually, depending on the photo you take, you can make them look kind of a little bit more filmic and a bit more natural. So if we can go to high, which you should never use in a GoPro, or high sharpness anywhere. If you need to sharpen something, I'd suggest do it in post. All right, do it in your editor. Medium is what it's defaulting out of the box, which is a little bit, still got that digital look. And here is low. So you can see the difference on screen between all of these. Subtle differences, but again, when something is kind of glaring at your audience and they're like, I just can't put my finger in it, it's distracting, and if it's sharp, it's too distracting. They don't know what it is, but maybe they're just going, I'll go watch something else or do something else. So keep that in mind. I generally have mine on low for photo and for video, and then that allows you to control how sharp or not that image would be. And these images aren't going to be blurry anyway, but just how natural they look. And then the color. So color is something that, depending on the mode that you're in, you may not get all the time for the options. So if we select color here, we can have vibrant, we can have natural, and then if you want to be controlling the whole lot, you can have it as a flat image, and then that's where you dial in the saturation and everything else. And then the shortcuts, these are what we have on the screen that we showed earlier on. You can just tap on any one of these and change it to whatever you want. So let's say I want to go EV comp, which is something that you would be using quite a bit. And now if we just go back to our main screen here, you can go back with the arrow. We can see now that our EV comp is here. So we don't have to dig into the menus, and we can just adjust that as we need. Now, something that you do need though is all of these presets here. We've got a whole bunch of them. So photo is the bog standard photo one. And if we see here, we've got burst and night photo. So night photo is obviously if you're taking stuff at night, which we will dive into, but burst is a crazy feature that, depending on the photograph you're taking, maybe with sporting stuff or with kids or whatever, or pets, this could be really good fun because it will take a whole bunch of photographs in a heartbeat. So if we go into burst mode here, if we take a look at the settings, We can see we have linear or wide again. Then our capture, so output, whether it's standard or raw. If you're just dumping stuff onto social media just without caring anything about color grading or anything like that, then standard is absolutely fine. Then we have our burst rate. Now, this is something that I say, do not leave it on auto, but control it yourself. But basically, depending on the lighting conditions, the GoPro will fire off a series of shots. But if you start sliding this up here, you could get 60 shots in 10 seconds. You could get 30 shots in 1 second, which is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm always impressed when you hear this thing go off. It's taken 30 shots, which is crazy good. And if you do that, keep in mind it's going to take, a couple of seconds to write all of those photographs to the SD card that is in the GoPro Hero 12. And then we have similar settings like schedule capture and timer, and the thing that you shouldn't use is zoom. Same with our EV comp, white balance, ISO min and max, and the sharpness. And then you have your shortcuts. So all of those work very, very simply. And once you master one, you master them all essentially, because the idea is the exact same. However, what about if you want to create your own preset? Select create new preset. So then, because the GoPro behaves differently in different modes, you gotta kind of go, okay, which one am I gonna use here? So are we a normal photo, a burst photo, or a night photo? So a night photo will also work well. Think like star trails, but also think things like waterfall, those long exposure waterfall photographs, which are very, very cool. You will need an ND filter to do it properly, but let's say we want to go with a night photo. So we just scroll down to night photo, we select the tick. Up here, then we select our lens, whether it's wide or linear. I'm going to go with linear. Then, because this hasn't been opened, we can just simply drop those down. So our output, let's put this into raw. Let's leave the shutter on something that's kind of let's expose for about 5 seconds, which is good enough in a lot of cases for waterfall stuff or light streaks or anything like that. Streaks, it's an Irish thing. And then we have our timer. So the timer here is going to be on automatically in this mode. Remember, we don't want any kind of vibration on the camera. So you press a button and you run away. It's like a bomb exploding, but it's not. But yeah. Anyway, so we scroll down, and again, because of the mode we're in, we've only limited kind of controls here. So our white balance, maybe if it's a waterfall thing, it's going to be 5500. Maybe you leave it on auto, but you can adjust it here whatever you want. Our ISO min and max, and keep in mind, right, that the shutter is going to be open for a lot longer, so we want to keep that ISO kind of pretty low. So let's bring it down to 200 tops, and again, you can adjust as needs be. Our sharpness, let's make sure that's at low. Our color, because we're control freaks, let's leave it at flat. And then if we have any shortcuts that we want to add in, and then just press the tick. Now, the one bad thing about the GoPro Hero 12, and in fact, it's all GoPros, and I really, GoPro, if you're watching this, and I know you've watched a few of my videos, thanks by the way, we should collab. You can't name any of your presets. So it can be custom 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but you can't go waterfall, or you can't go whatever. So you can select air, bike, epic, motor, mounted, outdoor. So I'm just gonna go outdoor. Select the tick. That feature would be nice, GoPro, I know you can do it. And then we can see now, we have all of our photo presets here. But what if you want to rearrange them? Well, this icon here will allow us to rearrange whatever we want. We can also turn some on and off by simply selecting the little eye icon. Let's say I want my outdoor one at the bottom. We can select that there. I want my burst one at the top. So keep it pressed, push it in, and then boom, press back, and you are good to go. And then if for whatever reason you're like, okay, I've screwed all of these up, I can't remember what I've done, what I haven't done, all we got to do really is go into the manage presets little icon, which is on the top. Let's hit that, and then let's hit the reset button. So then it's going to reload all the presets back to start, and it's going to delete all of your custom presets if you created a bunch of them. So remember that there is no going back. And there, if we go back, we're all back to the start, and that lovely little preset that we created is now gone for those waterfalls. Speaking of waterfalls, if you want to see how to take incredible photos like this with the GoPro camera system, then check out this video right here. And subscribe if you want to make better vids.